And now it's time for Victoria's Gluten-Free GastroGab, the information source for your gluten-free lifestyle. Today, Victoria talks with Chef Elan Wenzel of Element Knife Company. And now here's your host, Victoria Wolf.
Hello, I am so excited you're here with us today. Today our guest is Elan Wenzel with Element Knife Company, and we are going to cut things. We're going to cut veggies. Just veggies. Learning how to cut properly is going to help you in the kitchen in so many different ways. It's going to make you a better cook. It's going to save you money, and it's going to be a lot of fun for you. So, Elan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so excited.
Pleasure to be here.
I have some knowledge cutting, but nowhere near the amount that I would like to have. So this is going to be really wonderful.
All right.
So let's start off with, I'm going to move this knife to the side. We'll see what that is all about in a few minutes. This is the knife that I went to Sur la Table. You say that? The kitchen store to buy. I went in and I tested it and I felt it was the best, and I got it home and I took it for a test drive for about a month or so, and then I didn't like it. So this is what you would call a Western style, right?
Yes, that's your classic European or Western style chef's knife.
Okay,
exactly.
And so this is going to be more familiar to most people than say a Japanese style.
I would say generally most people, especially like home chefs, this is what is most common, this style of knife and the way it's stylized with the blade profile and that Western style handle, classic black handle with the 3 rivets.
Right.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's kind of weighted okay, but it feels a little clunky to me. And maybe that's why I never really liked it. It felt maybe a little heavy.
They can be, and the German cutlery tends to be the workhorse, really. They're thick. The steel is very hard. It comes out of tank technology, and I think Zwilling is the city.
Yeah, the same steel as they make tanks.
Well, that's my understanding. Is cool. The technology of the steel and the alloys really improved at that point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so now in comparison, this is your knife, your chef's knife, and it is just so much lighter in my hand.
Yeah.
It feels more an extension of my hand. So can you talk about what the major differences is between these two knives?
Well, when we compare Japanese-made cutlery to European, Western, or German-made cutlery, it's really apples and oranges. The alloys are different. The Japanese, especially the 2 brands I carry, they really focus on something they call the sweet point, which is the way that the knife balances, and so that I'm glad that you noticed that, because you mentioned it feels like an extension in your hand, and it really should. The tool should feel comfortable. It's not going to fall forward or fall backward because of the weight issues.
This one.
And also Japanese steel, typically the knives are a little thinner at the spine. And a lot of the time, most of the time, Japanese knives don't have this little protective heel, which is great if you're new or getting into cutlery. But
so this is the anti-don't cut yourself heel?
Well, yeah, so when you grab your knife, it gives you a little protection here. But because of how wide this is, when you're on a sharpening stone, it actually lifts the blade up a little bit. So you have to kind of stop sharpening short of the heel here. And this is something that I like to use, this actually point on the heel, particular cutting techniques or something to that effect. And if you do sharpen all the way to the end, like I said, it's going to lift that blade off, and then you're going to start to get like a dip here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting. I never really looked at knives like that to see that, and I would love to know what you do with this part of the knife, and maybe we'll get to that, or maybe we won't.
Yeah, and another thing that you may not like is typically Western style knives you sharpen at about a 20-degree angle. And with how stout those particular alloys are, you have a really strong blade, but it's not going to get as sharp as some of the Japanese cutlery, which is in that 15 to 16 degree range. So thinness, when we're looking down the blade like so, that double bevel, the thinner you are, the sharper it's going to be, but it is going to be a little bit more delicate.
Okay, well, delicate sounds better when you're cutting things, because feels like you would have a little bit more control, or a lot more preciseness and control if you have
your vegetable, you're not smashing food, you're really cutting through, and so there's a lot less cellular damage when you make your vegetable cuts.
That is definitely a plus. Yeah. Okay, so we're probably going to talk a little bit about sharpening toward the end of the show.
Okay,
but now
great.
Let's just jump to the big topic, the onion.
Onions, yeah.
Okay, so I have this onion story that from watching the very first season of MasterChef.
Okay.
And I was just totally enthralled with it. And when they got down to, I forget how many they gave aprons to. Have you ever seen MasterChef?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit. Yeah.
So when you get past one thing, you get an apron.
Okay.
And they give you an apron, and then everybody comes in, and I just said y'all. I don't. That's my Florida coming out of me. And then their first task, where they were going to whittle down all these people, is they gave them a 10-pound bag of onions, and they said cut these onions all, and they were looking for a dice, everything uniform.
Yes, consistency.
And so I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I would never, not that I would even be on the show, but I would never make it. I can't do this. I have no idea. And I was so flabbergasted how some people were cutting onions. But then there were others who were cutting exactly the way I used to cut an onion. And nothing was uniform and nothing was good. So having uniform cuts serves two purposes. One, everything cooks evenly.
Yes.
And then also it looks better and it eats better as well.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Anything else having uniform cuts covers other than those two?
Well, practice makes perfect. So if you're a novice or a pro, go for that consistency. And if you are a novice, don't go so fast. Don't try to show off to yourself or to anyone else in the room. Just go slow. Become comfortable with how the knife feels, how the food feels. Listen, and not with your ears, but try to receive that feedback from what the food is telling you, how it feels in your hands and how it sounds on the cutting board, et cetera, et cetera. And little by little, then you can pick up the speed.
So you're saying the food is going to talk to you in a silent, telepathic way?
Well, yes.
In a sense.
In a sense, but also we have senses, right? So when you're working in a restaurant situation, you always want to have your I say. So like, let's say you pick up something and maybe it's not labeled with a date and you don't know how old it is, and like maybe visually you're picking up something, or if visually it looks fine but maybe you open the container lid and something smells off, then you kind of focus in on it and then you can determine if that food product has gone rancid or something to that effect. Yeah.
Okay, so the food speaks to us in many different ways.
Yes, absolutely.
To our senses, which is pretty cool. Okay, so the typical way that I think a lot of people who don't know how to cut an onion is they just start chopping and they hope for the best outcome that they can get.
And if you follow some basic principles and fundamentals, then you can apply that to just about anything that you cut.
Okay, show us basic principles and fundamentals.
So
I'm going to follow along.
There's two ways to cut, to dice an onion, I think is what we're going for here.
Yes, dice an
onion. So I think one common way, you want to take off this end piece, and then a lot of people will cut the onion in half, and they'll leave this little bottom nub on as a way to keep everything together.
The root nub?
Yeah, the root nub as a
way to keep everything together so you can hang on to it. Okay, and then we're going to peel it.
We're going to peel it.
Sometimes onions are really, really hard to peel. Does that mean something about the freshness of an onion, or it just is?
I don't actually know the answer to that. I know that onions are cured for a while, or maybe it's dried before they go out
I may have
into
to ask
the market.
The Growers Organic person when he's on our show that question. He should have the answer to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I find that when it comes to vegetables, there are so many variables that can change the taste and the texture. It's the pH level in the soil, the amount of sunlight, the region. When I trained sushi in Japan in 2004, I had 5 years of sushi under my belt, plus culinary school and cooking. And I was very accustomed to the way vegetables felt here in the States, especially working with those Japanese vegetables, but maybe States grown. Mm-hmm. And typically they seemed very hard. Our vegetables are very hard. And when I went over to Japan, even though they were the same vegetables, they felt so foreign to me. They had they had a crispness, but yet a tenderness to them.
Is that because they were fresher? Or you don't know?
I don't know exactly, but I suspect, I researched a little bit, and like I said, it's the pH level, the amount of sun, where they're grown, all these things play an effect into it. And also the farms. It was a lot of what I experienced in the countryside. There was a lot of farm fresh vegetables and meats coming to local restaurants.
And they're in different soils. They probably don't have nearly the amount of pesticides that we have.
That could be, absolutely.
That's very interesting. So a carrot is not a carrot everywhere. A carrot can vary slightly depending on where in the world it was grown.
Yeah, and I think we see that throughout the year. Like a carrot one time of the year may be harder or more tender or sweeter or more sour or bitter. So I think all those factors can play
I'm
into it.
going to have to pay more attention to my carrots. Yeah. I mean, that is the case, because sometimes I'll buy carrots and they're like, oh my God, obviously they're sweeter. Sometimes I'll buy and I'm like, why do I like carrots? This is not a good carrot.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so we've got our onion cut in half. We've peeled it. So what's our next step?
Okay, so one technique I learned originally was going towards the root nub. So cutting parallel this way. And
you're not going all the way through.
I'm not going all the way through. Once again, right here, I'm just going shy of cutting into that nub, and it kind of holds all this together.
And you're doing a straight down cut.
Straight down cut.
Okay.
And with this half, I'll show you something that I had learned later on, too.
Okay.
Which is just a slight variation of what we have going on here. And then what a lot of people do is they'll come in sideways, parallel to the cutting board, once again stopping shy right at that root nub.
And how many slices? 2? 1?
It depends. I think
Depends how big the onion is.
How big the onion is and what size dice you're going for. Are we going for a small dice or a medium dice, a large dice?
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
And then now, since we have lines cut this way and lines cut this way, we just want to cut across. And once again,
talk about the claw.
The claw, I think we all know.
The claw's the most important.
I think we've all heard about the claw, but it's very important. And what a lot of the time you're looking for is to have your knuckle guide the knife. So you don't want to raise the blade.
Your middle knuckle.
Your middle knuckle. You don't want to raise the blade above your knuckle because you may bring the knife.
You may take your knuckle out, basically.
But with the claw, you can do a push forward technique, which is common with the Japanese. Or you can do the rocking technique, which is more European, French, German style. And then I think the French even have where the whole blade comes off and you pull back. But nonetheless, with your claw, now we can manipulate the food. We can hold it together like so. We can manage our hands. But all the while, that middle knuckle. So I've always kind of struggled with this technique.
I struggle when I get close to the end. Oh, look how straight that is.
Yeah, so you can see here, like with this, I'm getting some mismatched pieces.
Yeah, I am too.
And I really like the concept of that, but we can accomplish the same thing if we just cut off this other end.
Okay.
Now turn a quarter turn and just go straight down once again. Just not, oops, I cut there, but that's fine. Not all the way through.
This is the way Rich cuts an onion.
And I find that instead of now cutting straight up and down, I want to follow the curve of these layers.
Okay.
And I'll just angle my knife slightly and I'll come in.
So just kind of cut around.
Yeah, and
maintaining the angle.
That's right. And you can see that. And we are left with this little thing which we can manage if we want. We can cut it down. Or if we have in a restaurant situation, maybe we have a stock bucket where we're throwing vegetables to make stock. But you can see here that with less movement or less
yeah, that seemed like a lot less
Less
work.
cuts, less work, we're getting a pretty consistent dice here.
Except for that last piece that I should have let go. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. And
so there are always more than one way to skin a cat, but
yes,
whatever works best for you. Some people, one technique calls to them for whatever reason, and that's fine. The end result is just follow those fundamentals, go slow, use the claw, follow safety, have a sharp knife, and try to have a consistent product and work towards that as a goal, and your cooking will improve.
Okay,
greatly.
so for somebody at home, when they're reading a recipe, 90% of the time, home recipes are just diced. There's no fine dice. There's no large dice. So what we just did is your basic dice, you would say, which is what would you? Yeah, and I would describe it as like a 1/4 inch or actually.
Well, I'm trying to remember what the dimensions were.
I got this handy dandy little thing.
Yeah, a fine dice is I think a 1/4 by a 1/4 by a 1/4.
I think I can't read that. Does that say 1/4?
That's right, 1/4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is a 1/4 inch.
Yeah.
So that's what you're shooting for, and then when you go above that, it's actually a medium dice is a 1/2 inch, and
that's
then
right.
I don't think you could do a large dice with an onion.
Show us what you have.
Oh, sorry. I have this lovely handy dandy tool. Got it when I was doing my online culinary school stuff because I didn't know. I'm like, but this gave a good idea. I remember Rich and I were doing this. We'd put it down going, is it about that size? Because we would get graded on actually.
Oh, sure.
Because
Absolutely.
we had a whole knife skill thing. So, okay. So if a recipe calls for a dice, you're looking at about a half-inch dice, quarter-inch dice, sorry, is across the board.
Yeah, quarter, that would be a great, and a lot of those home recipes, it's really the flavor profiles that they're giving you, and then you can always elaborate or change or manipulate, amend it any way that you want.
Right, and not all the recipes are correct too. They may tell you to do a dice, and then they've got something else that is something totally different.
I mean, that's out there too. Sure, that's out there too.
So you always got to be paying attention. Okay, so do we have another onion? Rich, can you grab another onion? Let's look at slicing. Let's say we want to put onions on a pizza, and we want to slice an onion. What is the best way to go about that?
Okay, well, so once again, and this is called julienne, I think is the word we're looking for.
Oh, even when you slice an onion, it's a julienne?
Yeah.
Okay, I did not know that.
And I like to cut both ends off for the julienne.
Okay.
And I'll cut in half. And a lot of the time I'm conscious to like these inner rings here. Mm-hmm. I typically like to cut across them like so versus this where you almost have two full hemispheres.
Oh yeah, because you've got two and I've just got one. So every onion is different.
Yeah, every onion is a little different. Not the end of the world, but I feel like it will produce a more consistent product.
Right, because otherwise you're going to have those little things that come out in the middle. Me and peeling onions. Okay, come on. There we go. Got it.
So in culinary school, I learned if we were to go parallel with our cut ends, that's incorrect. And it really makes a less, basically, and that's a half of a full sphere. That's incorrect. You want to go the opposite way.
Oh, see, that's what you would normally think. It's like,
Yes.
I'm just going to cut it like that. I'm going to have nice little slices.
Yeah, it doesn't have as great of a mouthfeel.
Oh, okay.
And it's going to be uglier. This will produce a more consistent looking product. Okay. And once again, not 100%, but follow that curve. So angle your knife as we go along.
Okay, so this is similar to the dice, but the difference is we didn't go through and, no, this is similar to the dice. But we're not going to cut it the other direction.
Yes, exactly right. And so I find that now you can, with that those fundamentals of following that claw, you can really get in here and angle exactly precisely where you want to hit.
I have a lot of practice to do.
It takes a lot of contact hours to become proficient.
So is that what this is supposed to look like?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Now, I find too that when we get to this end, it starts to become a little unstable. So all you have to do is flip this on the side that you were just cutting, turn it around, and now we have a more solid piece to hold on to.
Okay. And we do the same
and
technique.
we can finish off our cuts. That's exactly right.
Okay, I got all the way.
And if we break this up, we can see that we have a pretty nice,
I will
consistent.
never slice an onion the same again. Now, Rich.
Now, if we were to go this way,
yeah, that's what they are not pretty.
right? If we compare the two, one we have these small wheels on the inside that aren't as pretty, and these long pieces.
Oh.
So this is just drastically different.
That's a night and day difference.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's right.
Wow.
And
okay.
you don't have to go as thin as I did. If you were doing something like a salad.
Well, that's about. I don't know if I could go. I'm going to take a lot of practice to get that thin. That's a question I have, and I think this is where I have a problem sometimes. It's like how. Okay, I'm here, but I'm just going to do it here or even here.
Yes.
How I have a problem moving this in the same, my hand doesn't move it, like I'll move it a little bit, then I'll move it a lot, then I'll move it a little, how do you keep your hand steady and move it at the same pace back?
Just practice. Practice. Yeah.
And you just keep slicing until you...
And I find one thing that will help your slices too is instead of pressing down, use the length of the cutting edge and push forward or pull forward.
And I usually do, I don't know
there
what I'm
you go,
doing.
yeah. Because you're focused on the angle there.
Yeah. Okay.
And then that's where that practice comes into play.
And then I guess you got to move your hand if you can't cut anymore. And okay.
Yeah, and you can actually start to bring that angle of your blade upwards a little bit. There you go. Perfect. See?
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
That looks really good. Yeah.
It's just a matter of going. It's hard for me to do anything slowly, but this is something I do have to just go slow and practice. And I have some skills, but obviously I want better skills. So
yeah, and
that is so beautiful.
Here's something I learned in the sushi world. We use a lot of green onion, white onion, and other vegetables, daikon radish, that have a lot of pungency, but we don't want that to overpower the fish. So it's typical that in the Japanese, using raw vegetables, you'll rinse them under running cold water in a sieve in a bowl 4 or 5 times, and then that really takes out a lot of the pungentness. So if you want to put raw onions on a salad or a sandwich, and you like that onion flavor, but you don't want it to be so overpowering, you just do a little rinse first, pat it dry. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Speaking of pungency, I'm feeling my eyes start to well up with tears. So there we go. Thank you. I am going to get rid of this.
Yeah, let's clear this off.
I'm going to use these on the pizza, so I'm going to put this in here. Oh, yeah, that was getting rough there with the onions. So many people, you see so many things on the internet.
Yeah,
it's like,
there's tricks you can do.
Oh, is it chew on something while you're cutting an onion? And I mean, but it's really, it just is when it comes to onions. What's funny is I have an eye I don't really see out of, and an eye I do see out of, and the one that waters. The other eye is usually always fine.
Oh, well.
And I don't know what that is. But at least it's only one eye, and I don't see out of it anyway, so I'm like, fine, bring it on. I'll be fine.
So that disadvantage is maybe an advantage when it comes to onions.
When it comes to onions. So if I was on Top Master Chef and had to do that, I'd be all set. Okay, so onion done.
Onion done.
Perfect. Okay, peppers. That's another very confusing for me and other people as well. So we're going to go... He's not as in good shape as here. I'll give you a good.
No, anything. So when it comes to peppers, I find that now some peppers have more of 3 sides and some have more of 4 sides. Mm-hmm. I just look for the straightest sides and I cut along that. So I just look for its natural. So I'll just start anywhere.
Again, the food is speaking to you.
It's speaking to me.
Visually, it's speaking to you. And how far in do you go?
Well, I don't like to go too far in on that first cut because then that allows me to open it up and see where those seeds are.
Okay, so my first cut is going to be a little shallow, so I can see what I'm dealing with. And now I'm going to be able to really cut the other sides off because I can see. Okay.
That's right.
I like that.
And then this bottom piece we can utilize too by cutting that off.
I usually give that to my son to eat while I'm cooking.
Yeah.
He likes it. He's like, there, he can have that.
And food waste, we want to be conscious of that, so we may do something where we're taking these off.
I'm playing with my food.
Yeah.
The seeds are one of the most annoying thing of a pepper, and that just look.
Yeah, and if you have we have 1 seed here, but if I had a handful of seeds, I can always turn this over.
Just dump it over, yeah.
And just give that a pat. Usually they'll all come off.
Okay, what about the membranes? Are these not really edible? Do you need to get these off?
They're edible for sure. Okay. It just depends once again how refined we want to make this food. Okay. If you're doing a really high-end restaurant or a really high-end dinner and you want it to look super pretty, you may pull these membranes off like so. And then if we want to do a fine bâtonnet or brunoise, we may want to cut that in half this way as well.
Well, okay, I wasn't watching you. I've got to see you do that. How
so you just keep your knife. You just keep your knife parallel to the cutting board, and give this a little press so that it's flat.
Oh my God!
And you can just cut this in half.
Okay, I'm good now. Okay, this is scary.
But I think for most people, we're going to be.
I know. I just want to try it though.
Now a trick too is you can cut this off here.
Oh, because I was like that was.
And to give you a little head start.
Okay. So I've got about 1/8 of an inch thick. So
yeah.
I'm going to try.
Now the thing about something like this is you don't put a lot of pressure towards yourself, right? You want to control because if you were to lose control, you might cut into your fingers.
Okay, this is definitely something that is going to...
It takes a little practice as well, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now I'm obsessed that I'm going to have to learn how to do this. Okay.
And it could also help if you had a thin, to practice, if you had a thinner piece.
Maybe. It almost intuitively, you feel like there's not enough product here to cut in half, you know what I mean? Okay, so I almost did that.
But I find that you'll find it easier with Japanese cutlery than...
I did it.
Yeah.
Okay, I have something I'm going to practice now. Okay, that was way cool.
Now-
Now on to actually cutting a pepper the way we're going to use a pepper,
That's
most
right.
likely.
So I would think for a pizza, we probably want length that will match about the onion. So once again, it's that full piece. Now, a lot of people will tell you not to cut through the skin side first because it's more tough. Although this does have a little bit more stability on the cutting board.
Uh-huh.
But if we're holding the product with our claw, that's not so much an issue.
Right.
And we could just come across. Yeah. And we could go, now that we're controlling it with our middle finger, we can go thin or we can go thicker. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
How did I not get through that? I don't know. But
Now, if you wanted to dice a bell pepper, once again, this membrane might be in our way.
now this is a very annoying looking.
Yeah,
pepper.
that membrane's a little
Okay.
obnoxious, so
So you
probably
want to
cut-
get as
yeah.
horizontal as you can. Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
that worked.
And I like to start the opposite direction. So now we have these lengths, and we just want to cut across them perpendicular to get our dice. Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
looks great.
Except I'm not cutting all the way through.
Yeah, and this might not be something that you want to do for a pizza, but
No, but it's
just to
something
see, just
you
to
would-
see the how. the
Exactly,
how to, yeah.
and again, you could do a small dice, a medium dice, or a large
Yeah.
dice. Okay.
Now, one trick, to helping keep the edge of your knife is if we have this food product here, don't take your edge and scrape it along the cutting board because that'll take the burrs and pull it over to one side.
Yeah.
Just turn your knife over. It takes a half a second and push that product
I always
aside.
fear that if I do that, I forget to turn it back over. I'm going to come down on it, but that's just some sort of nightmarish fear.
I mean, it could happen if you're not paying attention.
I
But
guess the point here is pay attention.
yeah. Now, if you don't feel comfortable having the blade edge up, at least turn your knife down a little bit and lightly bring that over.
Okay, so you're not scraping the knife against
Yeah.
it. And speaking of cutting boards, wood is the best cutting board to use, correct? Or is there a better? Oh,
Well,
look at this. I'm just going to down here.
the softer the material, the more edge retention your knife will have.
Okay.
The harder it is, the more quickly it will wear away. And also, how you're pressing. You don't have to press hard with a sharp quality knife.
That's true.
You can press lightly, and that
you're
will
not
also.
sawing, you're slicing. You know?
That's exactly right. So things like bamboo, they're really economically great, but they're very hard. So I've seen marble cutting boards, glass cutting boards. Those are not cutting boards. Those are atrocities.
Yes, glass is horrible. Clank, clank,
As
clank,
far as
clank.
wood goes, end grain cutting boards are the softest and nice. Also,
Okay.
side grain, I think is what they're calling it, can be really nice also. There are some polyurethane, I don't know what the material is, some poly something cutting boards. Some are really hard, others are more soft. So
You see those a lot in restaurants because they're more.
health departments don't like wood.
No, they don't because
they claim that they harbor bacteria, and if you're cleaning properly and following HACCP guidelines, I don't think it's an issue, but the
I
health
don't
departments
either. I
do.
agree.
So
Yes, so
yeah.
and you cannot mess with the health department. That's
No, you do not want to mess with the health department.
But
You
at
definitely
home-
follow the rules.
At
Yeah.
home, if you have the choice to get a good wood cutting board, I mean, the ones we're using today, these are booze boards, which are not
Yeah, booze
expensive, but these will last for 20 years if you take care of them.
Oh,
or
sure,
more.
absolutely.
And same thing with the knives.
Same
too.
thing with the knives. If you care for your tools properly, they will serve you.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think I know. Growing up, I grew up with the person, the woman who raised me. She had what she have? She had a paring knife and another knife that's a little bit longer. I don't even know what you would call it. It's not a chef's knife or anything. It was thin, almost looked like a steak knife without the serrated edges. That's all she ever used. So knives were not even something I thought about. I did, Then when I got into cooking more, I realized that it's such a big difference to have a chef's knife. It can do everything in the kitchen. I know a lot of people are afraid to get knives with a blade quite this big, but like you're saying, when you learn how to do it and you get better at
Yeah.
it, you'll never go back to that tiny little knife.
Well, that's
you might
right,
be
because
using.
knives are long for a reason. They have cutting power, slicing power to get nice, precise cuts. And a chef's knife, I like that you said a chef's knife can do everything. That's absolutely true. If I could only have one knife in my quiver of knives, it would be a chef's knife. You can do fish, poultry, beef, vegetables. You can do everything.
Right. I can't think of anything you couldn't do.
There are some knives in terms of length or blade profile that are limiting. Like there are some Japanese vegetable knives that are very flat, that don't have a point. It's very limiting. It's just specifically for vegetables, and they're great for that. If you're really a gearhead and you want those tools, you should do that. But
you have a knife for every possible use.
Yeah, that's right.
But for the most part, a chef's knife is going to get you everywhere you need to go.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So do we want to cut some more, or we want to make a pizza? Mushrooms. Okay. We're being told by our director to cut the mushrooms. Okay. So mushrooms. Do you always pull the tail out, or do you? Are there other? I've seen times where the tail is used in cooking. What is?
Yeah. No, I find like for these kinds of button mushrooms, and certain kinds of mushrooms, the stem or the tail
you really
is tender and tasty, so you should use it.
But
if it's really woody and you can't chew through it, like typically shiitake mushrooms, I won't use the tail at all.
Woody,
yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you want to, you can pop it off.
That's generally what I do. But I'm sure that
you can cut it off.
Popping is more fun.
Yeah.
Especially if you're making stuffed mushrooms, you're going to do that anyways.
That's exactly right.
Big enough for stuffed.
Now, if you want to leave the tail on sometimes, or even when we get into cutting, you can certainly take one small slice off the bottom, and that's usable. And that gives you something that is stable cutting surface.
Oh.
And typically we cut across the mushroom.
Now, mushroom is definitely something that you put hardly any power.
Yeah, they're so soft and light. Now, if we have the stem off, obviously we can cut across the other way because
you've got
there's
a bottom. Mushrooms are about the only thing I think I can cut fast.
Yeah.
Semi-fast.
Oh, it looks great.
Until it fell over.
And once again, it's up to us, right? We can determine, do we want really thin slices? Do we want...
That's pretty thin.
That's right. Do we want something that is a little more broad?
And when you're cooking at home, you have that, it's not like you're in a restaurant and somebody's judging you or anything. I really hope that the people you're cooking with at home are not just like, it's like, honey, the thickness of this mushroom is just not, it's not thin enough for this dish. Yeah, I don't think that's...
I would hope not. Yeah, in a restaurant setting, you typically are following recipes so that the dishes and the composed dishes and the components and whatever the sauces are consistent for the guest.
Right.
But at home, you have total creative freedom.
Right. And so, I mean, I'm one of those people who want to be as precise as possible. I want to get there, but not everybody needs to be. So it's not necessary.
You don't need to be, but once again, if you're into food and you're into cooking, that should be a goal, especially because it's going to give you, like you talked about earlier, more even cooking times.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's going to be better mouthfeel too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to make the pizza. We have Rich made this homemade pizza sauce, which is really just tomato sauce and some spices, which this recipe will go up on the website. I will say it's very similar to the pizza sauce we use on our pre-made pizzas, but not the same, because if I gave you that recipe, I'd have to kill you. Okay, we're doing this one with cheese. We're not doing a cheeseless thing. And I'm going to have like one probably tiny slice, and then if I have any more, I'll get sick. We've got some fresh
that
mozzarella here.
Yum.
And we're putting that on. It's going to be double mozz. This is going to make it a decadent pizza.
It's one of my favorite cheeses.
Cheese. Yeah, I can't eat cheese, but I want to put a lot of cheese on here. If I could eat cheese, I'd want a lot. And then we've got a little 50-50, half skim, half whole milk mozzarella.
And you do the 50-50 because why?
We use the 50-50 on our pizzas because the 50% that is whole milk is going to give you that ooey gooey.
The ooey gooey.
Yeah, because you can't really get that with a part skim, mozzarella. And so then the part skim kind of balances that out because we didn't want it to be too heavy either. So, okay, so what do we have? Rich, thank you for slicing up some pepperoni. Got that.
Oh, yeah.
On there.
Look at that.
Okay, then what do we want to put? Onions, mushrooms, and peppers? That sounds good.
Yeah.
This is kind of funny. We had Italian sausage, and we lost the sausage. Rich is like, where's the sausage? He just bought it today. Where's the sausage? So we don't know where the sausage went. So I think, a few months from now, we're going to find some decomposing sausage somewhere. But I don't know where that's going to be. It's probably in the car. It probably fell out or something. Okay, what else we need? Oh, onions. Okay, so this...
When I trained in Japan, we had a little work vehicle that we would take to the fish market in the morning, and we brought back a box of eels, live eels. And there were so many in there we didn't have a count, and I guess one had escaped under the car seat without us knowing it, and we discovered a petrified stinky eel several months later.
Oh my God, that's not a story many people in this world can tell. That's pretty amazing. Okay, so we are going to get this pizza in the oven. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to enjoy pizza and do some more knife stuff.
Yum.
Victoria's gluten-free Gastro Gab will return after a word from our sponsors and partners. Victoria's gluten-free Gastro Gab is brought to you by Victoria's Gluten-Free Kitchen, makers of award-winning pizza crust, breads, buns, ready-to-bake pizzas, and garlic breads, sold in retailers and served in fine restaurants all along the Front Range. Visit our website at victoriasglutenfreekitchen.com to find a retailer or restaurant partner near you, or to order our products online. Victoria's Gluten-Free Kitchen, free of gluten and tolerant of average. Nothing goes better with pizza than beer, and Victoria's Gluten-Free Gastro Gab proudly serves beers provided by Colorado's only dedicated gluten-free brewer, Holidaily Brewing. Visit their tap house in Golden, or find a retailer or restaurant near you by visiting their website, holidailybrewing.com. The right knife does make a difference. All demonstrations and product preparation for Victoria's Gluten-Free Gastro Gab is done with knives provided by Element Knife Company. Find the right knife for you by visiting elementknife.com. Victoria's Gluten-Free Kitchen products are made with only the finest of ingredients, including locally made Colorado Mills sunflower oil, delivered directly to our kitchen by Healthy Harvest. Check them both out at comills.com and healthyharvestnongmo.com. And now let's return for more of Victoria's Gluten-Free Gastro Gab.
Welcome back, and we have a hot pizza that I'm just about to cut. Now this pizza, we're just doing a pretty basic. Most of the pizzas I've got some sort of cold garnish on there, but we're just doing a straight up pepperoni, veggie, and cheese pizza.
Looks delicious.
And as I say every show, I like to cut my pizzas with a knife rather than a cutter because the toppings don't move quite as much. And I actually like using the knife better than the pizza cutter. I'm not very good with the pizza cutter. It's just like I can't see when it goes like this, and it's not good. Okay, obviously I didn't do that well. Okay, this is, whoops. See, there's the ooey gooey of the cheese there.
Whoa,
there you go.
All right. And this is the gluten-free crust.
Yes, it is.
Oh, look at that crisp on there. That's great.
Yes, our crust is out there in some restaurants cooking at 1,000 degrees in a wood-fired oven. So it'll hold
Fantastic.
up to that. Okay, yes, I'm dairy-free. Yes, I'm putting this on a plate. This is my treat. Hopefully I won't get myself too sick, but this looks too good not to try. It has the fresh mozz on it. Oh.
Whoa, let's do it. The ooey gooey
Is there?
and that light crispiness on this crust is really fantastic.
That was good audio.
I don't cheat on gluten at all, and I don't really consider this cheating on dairy. I can have about this much before I really start to react. But if you're gonna cheat on the dairy, this is what you want to cheat with because this is so good. This cheese is amazing.
Yeah, that ooey gooey.
Oh,
Wow.
but I just burnt myself. Oh my God, it's so good.
I'm impressed by this crust quite a bit.
Thank you. Oh, I have not tasted mozzarella like this in years. Oh, now my body later will be going, and you're not going to do it again for years. So,
I finished that already.
oh, would you like another piece?
That's good. No, thank you.
No, okay. So let's after we finish chewing, because I've got to finish this is my treat. We want to talk about sharpening, why it's so important, what the options are, and what happens if you don't sharpen your knives.
Well, if you don't sharpen your knives, you'll have a dull knife. And I think we all know a dull knife can be dangerous because it might skip off the food and cut your hand. If you cut your hand with a dull knife, it's going to do more damage. It's going to tear the flesh instead of cut into the flesh, and then you have longer healing time, and it can be gruesome.
See, I would have never thought that, but you are completely right. I would have never even had that thought process. But when you think about it, it's a jagged cut versus a clean cut.
Yeah.
And a clean cut's going to heal much better than a jagged. It's like getting cut with glass or getting cut, paper cut is usually a pretty clean cut because it's such a fine surface.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting. So if you're going to cut yourself, make sure you do it right.
That's right. I get it. People who are not accustomed to handling cutlery, especially sharp cutlery, it can feel scary. But like I said, just follow those basic fundamentals of going slowly, becoming comfortable with how the knife feels in your hand, becoming comfortable with how the knife feels cutting into vegetables, and then you learn that you don't have to power through. You don't have to hold the knife tightly and really power through the food.
Right.
Let the knife do the work, and that's going to make cooking really pleasurable.
Right, that's a huge difference. And I know with dull knives, I've had dull knives in the past, and it's almost like you're sawing.
You're sawing it, you're fighting it, it's a chore, and I think that could be a small part on why some people really don't enjoy. Knife will feel, like we talked about earlier, like an extension of your hand, and it feels natural in your hand.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of home cooks have bought their knives in blocks because they were everywhere for so many years. Oh, look at this knife block, and you get 8 knives or 10 knives. And you really don't need all those knives.
You don't need all those knives.
And so then they come to the realization that they're not good, they get dull, and then they don't know what to do with them.
One knife gets dull, and they go to another knife, and that becomes their favorite, and that becomes dull, and then
they're like, forget it. I'm just buying the pre-diced onions. So here is what most home cooks, I think, are using as a sharpener. So you want to talk to the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Sure. That? This is a sharpening implement, and there are a ton of these out on the market. Some, and the contraptions can range in the way that they are set up, where they have these rods or wheels or whatever it is. And I feel like with these, you kind of get what you pay for. So if you go to IKEA and you get a $5 one, it's not going to put a great edge on your knife. It might damage the edge. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to damage your knife to the point of not being fixable. It's just not going to put a great edge. Kyocera makes one much like this, where you put a little water and it has a ceramic wheel inside.
Oh,
and
that's interesting.
The wheel has, on the perimeter of the wheel, there's a little V-shaped divot cut out, and that's just at the proper angle to put the right edge, and you just roll it back and forth, and the water gives some lubrication.
So you're not damaging your knife.
So you're not damaging your knife as much. And then we get into how we as chefs, and especially in the Japanese world, sharpen our knives properly with a ceramic water stone. And I have one here, which
you want to grab that and show us how that works?
And so these.
Because this looks, I've used one before, but it still looks daunting, even though I've used one, I've seen it used.
It takes practice, and what I tell people is going back just for a minute, something like this can be worth it for the right person that has no interest in learning how to sharpen their knife, but they want great cutlery. So something like this can be the compromise.
As long as you buy a quality version of that. But that is not a quality version.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, if you really want to learn how to take care of your knives and sharpen them properly, get a ceramic water stone like so. You just soak it in water for 10, 15, 20 minutes before you use it. Don't store it in water, especially if it has a wood base, because that's going to get rotten.
Is that a wood base?
This is a wood base, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would rot out.
And I like to just put this at about a 45-degree angle.
Did when you stored it, when you put the water in it for 10, 15 minutes, you put it ceramic down? Or
that way I just turned it upside down, so I didn't have to, because of the base, cover the whole thing. Okay. And so what's going to happen is it's porous. It's going to drink that water. Okay. Exactly right. You just want to with medium pressure. We're not looking for maximum pressure. We're not looking for.
You don't want sparks or anything.
Yeah, you don't want sparks or anything. You just want to run the knife over the edge lightly. Now, one thing I'm making sure not to do, and I'm just changing the angle here for the camera, is when we run the edge over, we don't want to swoop up or lay it flat. We want to keep that same
Maintain
angle
the same angle. And
all the
you're
way through.
At you said an 18 to 16 degree angle?
Yeah, and you can choose whatever edge angle you want to establish. I like to do about 16.
Okay. And that
Now,
would be
16 for me
Japanese.
might be different for you. I eyeball it.
Okay. But they're different for different types of knives. So a Japanese knife would be a lower angle than
Yeah, and you can certainly change the edge on a Western blade, but it work because those alloys are really
Okay.
hard.
Okay.
But you can certainly do it. Yeah.
Okay.
And you're going to need a little water from time to time for that lubrication, so you can see that the stone is drying out a bit now. And some people say, well, you have to start from the heel and work your way back. That's the matrix of the molecules. They don't know what direction they're going in. So I think that's nonsense. The principles that you want to follow are not changing that angle, don't sweep up, don't lay it flat, don't press too hard, and keep your stone flat. So after a while, you're going to have to get a stone fixer or a cinder block or a sidewalk, bucket of water, and because you're going to get a divot in the stone. So you want to wear away the ends that haven't gotten worn away to keep that.
Okay, to keep
but it takes a while. You don't have to do it every time, but
Oh, okay.
yeah. So there's some basic care.
Okay.
And one thing, since we're talking about knife care, one thing everybody should know is never ever put a knife of any quality in a dishwasher.
Yeah.
High heat, high pressure jetting, and water can get into the connecting points and wreak havoc.
Okay.
And you could hurt, if your dishwasher is really hot, you can hurt the temper on the knife, and then your edge won't hold as long.
Okay, that's good
Yeah.
to know. We never put any of our knives in, but some people may not know that and think, oh, yeah, it's a piece of cutlery like everything else
Don't
goes
do
in
it.
there.
It's terrible for a knife. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you learn anything, one thing today,
One thing,
don't
take
put
away,
your
don't
knife
put your-
in the dishwasher. Okay, so can I try that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I start here.
I like to start at the tip, and I also like to hold my fingers
At the tip. Okay.
at the tip, almost where the pads are almost touching the stone.
Okay. Like that?
Yeah, and you want to start over here and then work your
that's
way. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Okay.
So
And so you
Yeah.
basically, you find your angle, like there's your angle.
there you go. Yeah.
Looks like my hand hit there. I got to figure out where to hold this so that
Yeah, and
doesn't happen.
that's exactly right. So you just have to become comfortable with it and practice. And I tell people, if you get a great knife and you don't feel confident that you're not going to make a mistake, take an old knife or find one at a thrift store for a couple bucks and use that as a practice knife to get comfortable with the directions, with the pressure, and really establishing that proper edge.
Now, did you just go one direction or did you?
I went, it depends, I change it up. Sometimes I go from tip to heel. Sometimes I'll go
Heel to-
one stroke back and
Okay.
forth.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the thing you don't want to do is this.
Yeah, you don't want to do
Do the
any
takeoff or
weird
the-
swooping,
Okay.
anything like that.
How do you know you're done?
Well, if you maintain your edge properly, it's just going to take a few strokes, maybe 20 to 50 strokes.
Okay.
If you let it get dull, it's going to take more. Now, also, we have to talk about the stone grit. So the stones come in different grits, and this is 1,000 grit. And I also tell people, if you're going to have one stone, get 1,000 grit, because it's rough enough to tear the metal away and establish that cutting edge, but it's fine enough to leave a refined edge that isn't going to feel rough when you're cutting food product.
Okay.
There's 120 up to 220 or 400. Those really low number coarse grit is for fixing broken tips and chips and establishing edges that have been neglected for a long time. So then you're looking in the 2,000 to 1,000 range for kind of tearing with that metal away without taking too much metal away. If you were to use that low grit count, it's going to eat the metal away more quickly, and the knife won't live as long,
okay.
so to speak.
So you want to stay around the 100 then.
And then you get into
okay.
polishing grits to like 5,000, 8,000, 20,000.
So there's some intense
Yeah,
things
and
you can
you
get
can
into
you
with
can
that,
get those
yeah.
and really nerd out if you wanted to. But
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The question I have is, I've got two questions. The traveling knife sharpener, good or bad? I've actually had him sharpen a knife before. I really don't think it was any sharper when he was done. But it's for your knives, because aren't they using a wheel
Now, you have to be careful. There are some that can be bad.
Okay.
There are some people that really know what you're doing. Stay away from grinders, like high-powered machine grinders. If you're going to use a machine or a powered wheel, make sure it's slow-moving and water-cooled.
Okay.
Which I have and I use.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember the one I used. I know he had a wheel, but I don't remember if there was water.
Hand sharpening like this is always the best.
Oh,
You get the best edge. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, he had a wheel. The other thing is, what's it called?
Like a honing steel or a steel. Yeah.
The honing steel is not a
It's
sharpening tool.
not a sharpening tool. I think it's one of the most misunderstood things out there. You see a lot of chefs or cooks that like take the steel and they're just going to town on it super quick.
Yeah.
And once again, I feel like if you're going that fast, you are changing the angle through that stroke. You may start out like a little bit more flat and then finish more high, or vice versa.
You're kind of coming in an arc, so it's natural.
And they're not intended to sharpen. They're not intended to tear metal away from the knife blade and establish that edge. What they are intended for is after prepping for hours, when we look, right, like once again, when we talk about looking down the edge of the knife, a knife has these burrs, right? And when you tear a metal away with a coarse stone or surface, it's going to leave those burrs, and then you want to refine 1,000, and then the 1,500 or the 2,000 or 3,000, and it refines those burrs. And they're still there at a microscopic level. You won't see them with your eye. And when you're prepping on a surface, because inevitably it's going to happen, there's going to be a little scraping, you're going to be pressing, those burrs get out of alignment, and that steel will just bring them back into position. And you really should just really slowly at the same angle that you sharpen, excuse me, just a few strokes on each side. It'll bring those back in alignment and your knife will feel sharp.
I have seen so many chefs on TV, with us mostly where you see them. I can't say I've seen one in the kitchen. They just go, they go to town. It's like, and when we had our knife skills through Escoffier, it was kind of like, whoosh, whoosh, and we were taught to go 4, 5, 7,
that's
10 times.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, because it was confusing then. They told us it did one thing, and I wasn't buying.
I think if you really wanted to geek out, I think an argument could be made that with a diamond coated steel, because that's pretty rough, in the beginning, while there's a lot of that diamond dust on there, it may tear some metal away and technically sharpen, but I think that's about the only argument could be made that those will sharpen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds good. So we've cut, we've sharpened, but we haven't talked about you and what you've done and your background. So let's talk a little bit about that. You have a very amazing
thanks.
set of experiences.
I fell into sushi in August of '99 at the Wolfgang Puck Cafe in Denver. I was hired to be a kitchen manager. I showed up for my first day of work. They needed help in the sushi bar. I thought it sounded interesting. It was a love affair. I fell in love with it, and I stuck with it. A few years later, 2004, I had an opportunity to train sushi in Japan, and I jumped on that opportunity, and it was another love affair all over again. I saw, when I fell into sushi, in culinary school, I was a gearhead always. Loved knives, always on the hunt for a bigger, better, badder, asser knife, right? And when I fell into sushi, I saw Japanese cutlery, which is a whole other world, and I fell in love. And then when I went to Japan, I saw knife shops, knife stores, all the tools, different types of tools, and I didn't realize there were so many brands of Japanese cutlery out there. And it solidified in my mind that I wanted to stick with sushi and kind of keep that love affair going with knives. And several years later, circa 2006, 2007, had an opportunity to start to sell knives. There was a traveling knife salesman that would come around unannounced, and I would buy something from him every time, and that kind of turned into a friendship. And one time I said, hey, I know a ton of chef friends. I know that Japanese cutlery is becoming popular in Western restaurants. How about I just make an introduction for you, and you can try to go sell more knives? And he asked if I could come with. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And he made a ton of sales, cut me a commission check, and asked if we could do that again. So we did that together for a handful of years. And I learned in that time driving around with him, because we would go to Vail, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, Denver Metro, Boulder, all around. I learned about the manufacturer, that they don't sell direct. And I also learned he wanted to retire. So I sold knives when he wasn't around, and I did that for kind of like a hobby for a handful of years. And then one day I was like, hey, maybe I can do something real with this. So that's really the foundation of Element Knife Company. And I found that I had an opportunity to help my community of chefs with education and with pricing. So I offer industry discounts, and I'm all about support and education. So I offer knife skills classes, knife sharpening clinics, all types of things. Yeah.
And not just from the culinary world, for home cooking.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
you don't have to be a chef to buy one of these amazing
No,
knives.
no, not at all. These are great for the home. You'll have one forever. It's an artisan build knife. And, I'll go to people's homes for a sales call and give them a knife sharpening clinic on spot.
So if somebody
Or a
says,
knife
"Hey,
skills class.
I'm interested in one of your knives," you'll go to their house and you show them the knives so they can decide which one they want to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great
Wow,
that way
that's
because you
pretty
can,
cool.
you can pick the knife up, you can get a feel for it and an understanding of how it's going to work or function and feel. And I do Tupperware parties too, of sorts. I say Tupperware parties where
Because everybody understands. what
yeah,
it
because
is.
they understand what it is. The host gets a kickback. People are invited. They buy knives. It's display. We can do a class or a clinic or a demonstration. It's a fun time.
Wow, I think that there would be a lot of people that would want to do that, and I think in the home cook area, knives are one of those things you don't even think that you need. That you think so many other things, skills are important.
Yeah.
Where really everything starts right here on the cutting board.
I find that to be the case. I get responses from my customers, home cooks, that are like, "Wow, this knife! I didn't know a knife could perform like that. I didn't know cooking could be so fun." And absolutely,
Because when you get good with a knife, it's pretty cool. And the other cool thing is when you have people over and you're cutting and you're fairly good, much better than they are, and they think you're amazing.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a great way to
that's
show off.
great. Well, Elan, it is amazing to have you here and to teach us everything.
Thank you.
People are going to be cutting onions that couldn't cut onions before.
I hope so. Yeah.
So we'll have to have you back and do some meat breakdown.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
In particular.
Yeah, let's do a
Okay,
fish butchery
'cause-
demo. That'd be
that would be. I have no idea.
That'd be a hoot.
That could be a 2-hour show. I don't know. Well, thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Victoria's Gluten-Free Gastro Gab. Be sure to visit our website at victoriasglutenfreekitchen.com for recipes from today's show and to check out previous episodes. You can also find links to our partner pages or find a retailer or restaurant near you that serves Victoria's Gluten-Free Kitchen products. Thanks for your continued support.